not millennial. Now, can I also say, respect to Joe Johnson. Some of us who can see what the next Conservative leadership election is going to be. It puts the Miliband brothers to shame. What's going to happen next time? That's all. And we know which Johnson we want. But why has Joe done it? Joe, I know Joe, because we're both former Financial Times journalists. We're both people, and it's very unfashionable these days. There are these things called facts. There's this thing, the things we used to guide public policy when we did it. There's this thing called the national economic interest. Do you remember that? There was this time when trade was a good idea, when we liked jobs. Do you remember that age? Where we thought that actually having some income to pay people was a good thing. When the job of governments was to make the country better off, not to trash the country. Do you remember those halcyon days when those things happened? Well, Joe, let's give him his due. He stands for all those things. He's a Financial Times journalist. I think he was a former Japan editor of the He really does understand this business about international trade and all that. He's also got the job which I had. He's Minister of State for Transport. Now, let's be clear. There are some things which are more important than Brexit. Much more. Managing the trains is much more. And once we've stopped Brexit, what am I going to get? I'm going to become what they dubbed me last time when I was Secretary of Transport, the thin controller again. You're going to get the Northern Powerhouse, you're having HS2, you're having East West Rail and all that, and I am nabbing Joe Johnson's job. Yeah. But at the moment, what's the most important thing to do? It's to keep it simple. And what is the simple thing to do? People's vote, option to stop Brexit, campaign like mad, no Brexit, end this nightmare. That is what this whole thing is about. And, by the way, there are a few things we're going to do in the process. The BBC is going to become the BBC again, not the Brexit Corporation. We are going to start welcoming migrants into this country again and end the xenophobia. We're going to respect Ireland and not trash Ireland, which is what's going on at the moment. Remember, I think some of the most monstrous things that are happening at the moment is British policy in respect of Ireland, as Jacob Rees-Mogg tries to turn the clock back to somewhere in the Middle Ages in terms of our relationship with Ireland. Because do you remember what Jacob says is the answer? By the way, what I always ask the Brexiters now is, what is their answer to the Irish problem? Because what Michael was explaining to you is this big problem. You cannot have different customs and tariff arrangements and a different immigration policy, which is what the Brexiters are proposing, and not have a hard border. You have to have a hard border. You may be able to do it without having the actual physical infrastructure there and pretend it's not there, and do it by having mobile searches and checks and stopping vehicles and all that. But you have to have a hard border. And of course this is hugely toxic in Northern Ireland and could bring back trouble. Let's be clear, because it will lead to smuggling. Smuggling will be in the hands of the paramilitaries, which is why the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland has said that the biggest threat facing Northern Ireland at the moment is Brexit, which is the reason why the Prime Minister is having to negotiate the backstop and all that to try and deal with it. But so what I do when I'm with Brexiters, and by the way, I spend longer with Jacob and Nigel and Boris Johnson in TV and radio debates on members of my own family, and you can guess how much I enjoy doing that. But the question I've now started asking, there are two questions, I'll tell you what they are. The first question, actually there are three, let me give you all three. The first question I ask is, what is your answer to the Irish problem? Because I've got an answer, and you've got an answer. No Brexit. That's the answer. How do you see there's no hard border? No Brexit. It's very simple. It's not complicated. Then you don't have different customs regimes. You don't have different tariff regimes. You don't have a different immigration policy. You don't have to have all the infrastructure accord. You can carry on. Now, do you know what Jacob said was the answer? Jacob's answer to the Irish border question is, Ireland should also leave the European Union. Now, you've got to give it to him. This is coherence. I mean, if they leave the European Union and they adopt our commercial policy and all of that, then you don't need to have a border. There is a slight problem. They don't want to leave the European Union. And why should we think that the answer to the Irish problem is neo-colonialism? That, by the way, has got a bit of a history between England and Ireland. It wasn't great last time, and we shouldn't be returning there again. The second question I asked them, by the way, is how much do you think we should pay the EU in the exit deal? Because Theresa May, remember, has said 50 billion. That is the deal which provisionally which is already agreed. Now this 50 billion is hugely important because this 50 billion gives the complete lie to the 350 million a week the NHS on the side of that bus. Do you remember the bus? Did the bus make it to Manchester or did you manage to keep it out? But that was the lie. Actually, there were two lies at the heart of Brexit. One lie was 350 million a week the NHS. The other lie was the 7 million Turks. Do you remember the 7 million Turks were waiting to invade? You know, they were poised. The Daily Mail said they were coming the morning after the referendum. They haven't appeared yet, as it happens. We're still in the European Union now. There's still no 7 million Turks. So those are fundamental lies at the heart of it. However, the other question I ask the Brexiters is how much, if it's not Theresa May's 50 billion, how much are you going to pay? Now, this is and this goes to the heart of Brexit, because if they say it's nothing, then of course Brexit isn't possible, because we're in default of our international treaty obligations, we don't have enough money to pay for all the farmers and what they're owed, all the infrastructure projects, the regional development projects on the road, and the whole thing becomes literally completely dysfunctional. But they don't want to admit they're going to pay anything, because that then gives the lie to the £350 million, and means, of course, there has to be an agreement with the EU, because if you're going to pay money, there has to be an agreement. So I keep asking them, how much will you pay? Nigel gets very irritated with me now, and so after the 15th time I've asked, he said to me, it should be very little. And I said, well, Nigel, how little? 10 billion? 20 billion? I mean, he wanted it to be less than 50 billion. And he said, Andrew, I think it should be a nice round number, 0. I said to him, Nigel, it cannot be 0. It's got to be a real figure, because we have this issue of your pension. Nigel's pension. He's a Eurocrat. He's been in the European Parliament. He doesn't turn up very often. He doesn't get performance pay. Maybe he wouldn't get a pension. But he is entitled to the £73,000 a year. And I said, Nigel, it's very important we pay your pension, because I do not want you to be in your old age a burden on the state. Very important that you're not. And I said, there's another problem too, because my other debate with him is, why was he spied in the German embassy filling out these big citizenship application forms? Because, I have spies everywhere. Madeleine and all these, they feed back to me. He was seen in the German embassy filling out the forms. So for several encounters, I kept asking whether it was true that he'd applied for German citizenship for himself, because he has a German wife. And I said I would exchange my seat in the House of Lords for his German passport. It's a fair deal. Anyway, he got very irritated. He would duck the questions. I knew there was something in it. And he told me in great exasperation afterwards that he was applying for citizenship for his kids. Now, this is very important. I said, this is wonderful. Nigel, it's wonderful you're applying for your children. I said, but there are many millions of other people in their 20s who would also like German passports. Why? Because they do not want their citizenship rights taken away from them. And if it's good enough for your children, it's good enough for all of the other young people in the country too. We have two big problems here. We've got to have an exit deal, because we've at least got to pay £73,000 times as many years as you intend to live after the age of 65. He wants to come to the House of Lords, by the way, and that significantly extends your life expectancy. So you could be with us for another 40 or 50 years. So it's quite a large exit deal that we need. The other issue we have is this issue of citizenship, which is vitally important. Now, Madeleine and a lot of the young people, and they have most at stake in Brexit, which is the reason why the young are overwhelmingly in favour of staying in the European Union. By the way, we should have votes for 16 and 17-year-olds if we have people there next year. Vitally importantly, after he told me he had applied for the German passport, there's this group, your organisation, which some of you may belong to, called Our Future, Our Choice, which is the young mobilising the young, which is fantastic. Now, one of these guys is really good at stunts. And the following morning, he turned up at Nigel's house with adoption papers. And wants to be adopted by Nigel. And I thought, why? This is one way we have to, needs must. We're desperate. referendums needed. One way through this quagmire of citizenship might be if Nigel adopts everybody in their 20s. So they can all get German passports. Well, actually, Nigel doesn't like this idea at all. He became very angry with me in our last exchange. But I've now got a new gloss on this, which I did last time. I said, Nigel, I know that you're not keen to adopt any people in your friends, but I do need to have the answer to a question. What is the maximum age at which you will adopt people? Because there are lots of people who are much older. I have a 93-year-old who's very keen to be adopted by you because she also wants a German passport. Will you adopt her? This is where our banter's got to at the moment. But the crucial point underlying this, of course, is that citizenship rights are being taken away from people, and these citizenship rights fundamentally affect people's right to work, to live, to travel, to forge relationships, to do all of those things which we've taken for granted and are one of the best things that's happened in Europe in the last 70 years. So what do we want? We want a people's vote, option to remain, defend our citizenship, and just one thing I want to say, because we didn't hear enough about this 2 years ago in the referendum too, which is also a fundamental reason why we want to stay in the European Union. And do you know what it is? Peace. So many of us are wearing poppies is because, of course, we're celebrating the desperate centenary of the end of the First World War. 2 world wars in the 20th century, and the European Union was created in the wake of the second so that it would never happen again. And do you know something? It has been phenomenally successful. There are only 70 years in the entire history of Europe when the peoples of Europe have been very largely at peace. And those 70 years are the 70 years where we were constructing and in the European Union. And why is that the case? Because the European Union is a club of democracies. There's never been 70 years when the major states of Europe have been democracies. And one of the conditions of them coming into the European Union is that they must be democracies and they must respect the boundaries of other European states. Now, at the moment in Europe, we have Putin, who has invaded one European state and half occupied it. Why? Because the Ukraine was about to join NATO and the European Union. He has troops massed on the borders of the Baltic states, with a real and present danger there. We have Mr. Salvini, who is the strong man in Italy, who has taken to tweeting Mussolini slogans on Mussolini's birthday this year. So you can see where that's going. You've got Orban in Hungary, who has abolished what goes for a free press, suspended judges, and is trying to abolish a university run by a Jew. You can see where that is going. The official opposition in Germany at the moment is the AfD, which has strong neo-Nazi elements in it. And the runner-up in the French presidential election 2 years ago was the National Front. Oh, and by the way, just the elections in Sweden, where the far-right party got 18%. Now, exam question. In this period of great instability, the rise of the far right, should Britain A, stay in the European Union and be at the heart of Europe, or B, leave Europe, become semi-detached, and complain when Europe falls prey to far right forces and the threat of massive instability caused by Russia? The fundamental point about this is that it's not just a nice to have Europe. It's not a nice to have alone, though it is nice to have more prosperity rather than less prosperity, trade that's free and all of that. It fundamentally defends our peace and our freedom. And if we take that for granted, which is what's now happening in this Brexit business, we will pay a very, very heavy price. And this week, the centenary of the end of the First World War, we should be very, very conscious of the price people have paid in the past and not subject the next generation to the possibility of having to pay a high price because we have played fast and loose with the peace and security of Europe. And this goes back to the very beginning of the European Union, because where does the European Union come from? It comes from the end of the Second World War, Winston Churchill's Zurich speech of 1946, where in the wake of the Berlin blockade and the Iron Curtain, he called for, and these were his words, a kind of United States of Europe, which is what led to the European Coal and Steel Community being founded, and then the Treaty of Rome, the Common Market, European Union as we have it now. And do you know something? Because you haven't read this much in the Daily Mail and the Sun over the last 30 years. But the European Union has been a phenomenal success. It has been the best project for international peace, harmony and prosperity, probably in the history of civilization. We should be proud, we remember, we should be at the heart of it, we should have a people's vote, we should win the people's vote, and we should put this nightmare behind us.
Everybody's got any questions for him. I mean, obviously, I read his book on class years ago. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm on the left of the Labour Party. You know, to me, Corbyn is. People calling me a player, I can't abide it because I go and grow up where I grew up, then call me a Blairite. But the reality is, what's happened to Labour? Why are they not opposing this?
The overwhelming majority of Labour Party members, there'll be many here this evening, Labour Party members and Labour MPs are against Brexit and for people's votes. And the party's policy, agreed by our conference in Liverpool 6 weeks ago, is also in favour of 6 tests which include the exact same benefits of the single market and the customs union, which means voting against Theresa May's deal, and then we've said that we want an election. If we don't get an election, then all options should be on the table, including a people's vote. So my own view is that by a process of elimination, we will get to a people's vote. That's what my own view of what will happen. However, it would be a good idea if Jeremy said it up front, rather than being forced into it by the collapse of Theresa May. So what I suggest we do, because it's people power here, is people should let Jeremy know what they think about his comments in Der Spiegel. And you should let him know very bluntly what you think on social media, by writing to him, by lobbying Labour MPs, so that we make absolutely sure that Labour does not commit a historic error of allowing the far right, Nigel Farage, in league with the right wing of the Conservative Party, forcing a Brexit on us, which will destroy the prospects of working people across the United Kingdom.
If you like wrapping rats around the cage, you and then you quickly, yeah.
If we don't give it that in itself will give to the Conservatives to vote for this okay. So how do you respond to that?
Look, let's be clear. As Churchill said of democracy, the situation we're in with the people's vote is the worst option except the alternatives. Let's be clear what the alternatives are. The alternatives are to say that we're giving a veto to the far right when it comes to calling another referendum and allowing the people to express their considered view, because they say that there will be serious instability if we hold a referendum. And do you know something? I'm not giving a veto in our democracy to Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. Any of you think that's a good idea? No. So the lesser evil is to hold a referendum. However, on the question about is it democratic or not, remember it was David Davis who told us a democracy which cannot change its mind is not a democracy. It's 2.5 years now since the referendum in 2016. That is a longer interval than between the last 2 general elections. And do you know who called the last general election early when she didn't need to? Because she wanted a further expression of the people's will, Theresa May. So she can't have her cake and eat it in that respect either. But there's a fundamental reason why it's democratic too, which was brought home to me in Belfast, where I've just been. However bad we think Brexit is here, it's a hell of a lot worse, potentially, in Ireland because of this border issue, which is really, really worrying. Which is the reason why latest polls are showing about 80% of their favourite staying in the EU. And they want to defend the Good Friday Agreement, which is essentially the peace treaty, which has maintained the peace of Ireland. no hard border, power sharing between the nationalist and unionist communities, and very, very close working between the British and Irish governments, which I should say, by the way, is in jeopardy at the moment because of Brexit, pulling Britain and Ireland apart. Now, one of the people in the audience in Belfast said to me, when we had the Good Friday Agreement 20 years ago, and there was a referendum, a copy of the Good Friday Agreement, which is a long document, 30-page, very technical document about the terms of decommissioning of weapons and things of this kind, was sent to every voter in Northern Ireland. Why? Because this was going to fundamentally affect their future, and their opinion was being sought in a referendum, and they read it. I mean, loads of people I've spoken to told me about it. And this person said to me, when Theresa May signs her deal, surely what we should do is send a copy to every voter across the United Kingdom and let them express their view on it in a referendum, as we did here in Northern Ireland. And the option, the only credible option facing the country should be between that deal or staying in the EU. We know what staying in the EU is because we're in it at the moment. Now, this gives you the complete answer to the reason why we need a referendum. 2 years ago, you could not send that document to the British people because it didn't exist. There was no set of terms for what Brexit should be. There was no answer to what's going to happen to the Irish border, our payments to the EU, the rights of EU residents in Britain and British residents on the European continent, what was going to happen to the customs union, the single market, free movement of people, all these crucial issues. There was no policy because it hadn't been negotiated. The first time the British people will know where that policy is in a month or 2 months' time, when Theresa May negotiates the treaty. So what should happen is very simple. A copy should be sent to every voter, and that is the reason why we need a people's vote. It's the first time people have seen it. We're a democracy. This is the biggest issue that's going to affect the British people in our generation. They should get a copy. They're perfectly capable of reading it and making sense of it, and then they should give their view in a people's vote.
Time's really tight. Again, there's not really time for any more questions for Andrew. I've got to say, and I love the books as well. The platform's fantastic because and the BBC stuff worked for them for years. Couldn't believe it when I was listening to the Today programme the other day when they were trying to balance the IFS and their findings on Brexit with somebody from the Taxpayers Alliance. So the IFS don't represent. They're number crunchers. Your numbers are wrong. So, thank you very much for being today. Keep up the fight.
We can definitely win this. The only thing that's stopping us winning it is a lack of confidence ourselves in our capacity to win it. 700,000 people on the streets of London 3 weeks ago. Every constituency, there's a big pro-European movement which is taking root. Brilliant campaigners like your speakers this evening who are out there too. Joe Johnson's resignation today is very, very significant because what's essentially happening is that the government is starting to implode. And sensible, level-headed Tories know that this is the wrong thing to do, and this is history from the past. If we keep pushing now, I'm convinced we can win it. We're in the end game, we're in the final 100 yards, we should really, really go for it. That means writing to your MP, doing social media, getting out to demonstrations, and seek to persuade and work with all your friends too. If we do all those things, I'm convinced we can win it. And that is their only beginning. Because part of the reason we're in this mess, let's be clear, is because governments didn't do enough to sort out the problems we've got at home, particularly in the Midlands and the north of this country. There is too much poverty, too much division, too much inequality, too much austerity. We need to tackle all of those issues with a new passion, but we will not be able to tackle any of them if we're having an existential argument about our place in the world, our basic security allowances, and the rules of our trade. So, what should our message be? Remain plus. Remain, but not as an end in itself, but as the basis for doing what should have been done in this country over the last generation, which is really sorting out our social crisis, fair a much better deal for working people in this country, and then we look back on this period as a nightmare, a car crash avoided, and the basis on which we started really sorting out the big fundamental problems which British people are expecting to be sorted out, and is part of the reason why they voted as they did 2 years ago. So we can do it, we've just got to have real passion, real commitment, and just absolutely go for it. Thanks very much.